like when you have like a pan that's been on the stove, you don't necessarily know if it's hot or not. So it could be a coating that you maybe put on the handle. So that way you can tell at a glance whether something is dangerous to touch. This could be useful in crowded kitchens or even just cooking at home. Hey everybody, welcome to the Pample Pod, the show with candid conversations and creative chaos. I'm joined here by Eugene.
Hey.
And Michael.
Hey.
And let's jump right into the big question. This is a segment where we tackle a challenging and conceptual question. And today's question is a challenging one indeed. It's what should you do when it feels like the stress is unsustainable? And that's not a very fun question to tackle, but it's something that I think a lot of people can relate to at one time in their life or another.
Yeah.
Maybe even right now, if we have a particularly unfortunate listener.
Yeah.
So let's sort of start off with talking about what we mean by that. Like, what's the difference between good stress or a challenge and something that's truly unsustainable? Like, where's the line?
It's an important one too, because there is a good amount of stress. There is such a thing as positive stress. It's not like it's all bad. It's usually, there's a middle ground in life. The way, at least I kind of see it, and I don't know about y'all, but it's the difference between, telling yourself, well, I'm feeling pushed, but I'm learning, or, there's some positive associated with it, and having it be fear-driven, like I'm afraid of letting XYZ person down, or, that the moment that you have that sort of fear-driven approach, that's at least when I see it as crossing the line, because it goes from that motivating value that with that positive association to almost pain-inflicting, right? Mm-hmm. That's where you lose some of the positive benefits of good stress, I guess.
Yeah, and actually my answer to your question, Jonathan, I think would be like the manifestation of that, of the balance. Like, as you mentioned, Michael, there's like the intrinsic motivation where like I want to grow and I want to do well, or versus the fear of failure or like letting people down. Mm-hmm. And if you're living in that fear perpetually every day, what tends to happen is that I think, to me, what happens when you cross this line is that you start thinking about the source of stress every single minute of your day, like all day and all night, to the point where you can be doing a completely different task that's not work related, but you're still, your mind is still running in circles about the stress. I could be talking to my parents, I could be talking to my friend, a student, but my mind is just still somewhere else. Like I'm still thinking about this source of stress. And then, I think we can all relate to this point where sometimes this stress becomes so just not helpful in our lives, to the point where we're just, the thoughts that come to our head just are not productive anymore. It's just like you're just bashing yourself, you're ruminating, and you're just falling down this downward spiral to the point where now you're just like telling yourself lies and claims about you as a person, and then you can start taking a big detriment in your own like confidence and self-esteem. And so all that initial fear of like, oh, I can't screw this up, can really start eating at you day by day, and then just becomes something that it's like a leech that just keeps sucking the energy out of you, to the point where you just come to the office later, you just you're not working to your full capacity. So
at some point, definitely affects your narrative and your sense of self-worth as well too, which can be detrimental.
It's an important distinction between what's kind of intrinsic motivation versus extrinsic fear-based motivation. Yeah, I think personally, I take a different approach to assessing if my stress is too high, or maybe I'd recommend this to other people. Sort of a three-pronged approach, maybe a fourth phantom prawn, which is if it's you look at kind of the quality of your sleep, the quality of your ability to kind of like exercise, and your ability to eat well. Mm-hmm. I feel like if one of those is affected, then you're probably just going through like a rough time or maybe a little bit of challenge. But if you're not sleeping well and you don't have time to like exercise or take care of yourself, and you don't have time to like eat well, then it's sort of triggers a downward spiral where it sort of feeds into itself in like a bad positive feedback loop. Mm-hmm.
I like that approach because it mimics what's called the Swiss cheese theory in aviation, where it's like if you have one layer of problems, you can probably keep going, but if you have two layers of problems, you probably should start really think about stopping. And if you have three, it's the idea that it's like if you had multiple layers of Swiss cheese with holes, and so if you have just one layer, you can go through. If you have two layers, well, fewer holes align. If you have three layers of issues, well, the odds you make it through are pretty bad.
Yeah, that's an interesting analogy. And as for the fourth phantom prawn, I'd probably call that like social relationships, or even maybe that should be the most important thing, where like if you're having trouble like relating to other people or like making time for people that you care about, then that's really important. And I think it should be considered. Maybe it's less of a trident, more of a
A fork.
Just a normal fork. Yeah.
It doesn't sound as great, but it's important.
Well, it's a trident with a very sharp end, maybe. That could be like blitzing a lance or a spear.
I think once you've run your tests and you realize like something's not okay, you can't continue in this manner. There's sort of two approaches to making things better. One is what you can do right in the moment, and the other is like what you can do long term. I think let's talk a little bit about the former, kind of what in the moment can be due to kind of run damage control or like reduce your stress or kind of cope with it better.
Yeah, that's an important one too. Yeah, there's. I like how you broke it down into what can you do now, what can you do later. I think it's a good perspective on it. I have a two-part answer, I guess, to that too. Kind of one is the regulating self part of it. I'm a fan of box breathing, for example. I don't know if y'all are familiar with the technique, but it's a 4-second, 4-part count essentially. Something like breathe in for 4 seconds, hold the breath for 4 seconds, breathe out for 4 seconds, and then hold with your lungs empty for 4 seconds. And you kind of cycle through that pattern a bunch of times. That kind of helps regulating in such a way. So especially in scenarios where you can, maybe high stakes scenarios that might have a lot of, your life is on the line kind of scenario. If you're a pilot, for example, or some other applications where you cannot afford to lose control because of stress, those are pretty helpful. It's a pretty helpful trick to have for regulation as well. And then the other part that's maybe more open to the office as well, but I think it applies in any kind of stressful situation, is to whenever you manage to self-regulate, right? Because usually a stressful event, if you're truly living it as bad stress, is an overwhelming event a lot of times too, right? So you kind of want to reach a point where you can regulate. And then once you can, at least personally, I like to take 10 seconds to really think about what is the single most valuable next step I could take. And that the idea is to be less emotion driven and more sort of in an intellectual phase, in a sense, where you can kind of re-anchor yourself to things that are factual and not necessarily perceived. It's important to feel your emotions, but then once you do that, you do want to anchor back to something kind of tangible and not be dominated by what is negative emotions, essentially. So that's kind of a way to maybe get out of it as well, at least for in the moment, high negative stress kind of situations.
I really like the specificity of those answers too. Kind of they're very actionable advice.
Yeah, they're what I do. I don't know if it works for everyone, but I feel like I would share at least something that's personal.
Yeah, no, I was going to say while you were talking, I was trying the box breathing technique, and I think it actually did make me feel more calm.
Did it work?
Yeah, it works, guys. Try it. All listeners, try it out.
Yeah, we can all do it together.
Next episode, we'll do a breathing exercise. Everyone,
it'll just be a whole episode.
Everyone hold hands and we're going to breathe together.
30 minutes of breathing exercise.
Yeah. ASMR at Pample Pod.
No.
Oh, wait, we have the mics for it, so.
There we go.
Yeah.
There's a bunch, there's different breathing techniques. That's just one of many. It's one that I forget even how I came about to discover that. I didn't invent it, but I know it's been used in different environments and stuff. And it was passed on to me, and then I found it pretty useful.
Yeah.
It's some environments, unfortunately, breathing doesn't work. For example, if you're, true, like if you're stressed underwater, you can't necessarily follow the same breathing pattern because it affects your buoyancy, right? So works in some cases, not others, but as long as you find something that works in the environment you need to manage your stress in, that's what's most important. That can take many forms.
Yeah, and once the dust has settled, how do you move from these sort of short-term strategies just to kind of run damage control or reduce the stress and move into more, I guess, maybe shifts in like your habits, your boundaries, maybe your mindset, to kind of prevent the stress from reaching that bad level in the first place?
Yeah, it's a good question, because I'm in answering that question, I'm also going to assume that if you're in this sort of kind of negative feedback loop, like Eugene was describing, it's also that it's not just a one-time stressor. Sometimes that's how life is. You have a one-time stress because the day has gone wrong.
Yeah.
But I'm going to kind of assume that we're talking about like cyclical stress, like maybe you're at a startup, right? And like things are just stressful by nature, or maybe you're on deployment or some other kind of situation where you have more recurring stress. I'll kind of just speak for myself as well. Like personally, I like to take 20 minutes out of the day, more like a sort of introspective type meditation type session. Kind of, learning to let go of thoughts, for example, or kind of like introspect in a little way. You can kind of go in with a goal. That goal can change every day, but I think it's important to essentially dedicate a weekday slot where you take at least 20 minutes to sort of acknowledge what's going on in your brain. I think feeling your feelings is a big part of overcoming stress. And then you kind of use that to essentially allow yourself to feel those emotions, but then also kind of realign with what your focus is. I think you kind of put it with essentially, so what your goals are as well, right? Also not just on a logical basis, but also an emotional one as well, But it's not the kind of thing that you want to necessarily wait to be extra stressed to start doing. That's where I think taking 20 minutes every day sort of proactively can help even reduce those stress levels before they start peaking past a moment that's unmanageable. The other part I think is blocking at some point during the week some block of time that you defend no matter what, it's untouchable, for something that is fun or enjoyable, and that's kind of a non-negotiable. The techniques we've mentioned before, whether it's the box breathing or taking 20 minutes, that's sort of like managing stress, but you also don't want to fall in that trap of like kind of constantly analyzing yourself as well. Like sometimes it is also good to just disconnect for the sake of disconnecting and recharging as well. So the problem is when you're stressed, it's very easy to come up with any and all excuses to not block that time. I got this deliverable, or this person's going to be angry if I don't do it, or, insert whatever excuse you have. You have an infinity of possibilities. So whenever you do have that block, it needs to be a non-negotiable, because the moment you start negotiating with yourself is when you're going to give some of that time away. And you're going to go from a proactive stress management strategy to a reactive one where you're just going to wait for the next spike to happen and then react to it rather than manage it preemptively.
That was really good points. I feel like what I have to answer is pales in comparison. But what I was going to think was just the two things that I think people can, myself included, things we can do to, do a better job in the future is like if you are a person that is prone to ruminating, like just try to work on not doing that, as well as just building and practicing high emotional intelligence. Because for me, I could speak to my own personal experiences. Like sometimes, like you mentioned it earlier, Michael, where it's like, sometimes if you're in this situation, this is not like a one-time occurrence. This could be something that just you find yourself in this pit over and over again, whether it's the same point of stress or something different, but you always just find yourself like in this not great situation. So like sometimes my brain would just be thinking like, hey, Eugene, look, you're back in this situation again. See, like you didn't improve. You're still stuck here. Like, why are you still like this? Why can't you grow, even though you kind of hit this wall several times in the past, and it just like devolves, and then like I'm just shooting myself down, so to speak. And what I'm saying, it's not just unique to me, and for some people that's what they experience as well. It's for some people like they can't imagine them being able to move past this source of stress. Sometimes it's so they try to put in these immediate like techniques to get themselves out of the situation. But what I love the question you asked earlier, Jonathan, where it's like not only how do we think about ways to get ourselves out of this situation, but to also prevent it from the future as well, because maybe you're really good at just getting yourself out of this pit in the moment, but like you're still seeing yourself like going downhill again in the next week or so. So I think so definitely like spend less time ruminating, because like that kind of feeds into the first point I said earlier, where you're just devolving into like non-productive thoughts, because none of your ruminating is going to help you at all whatsoever. And I also think you just practice high emotional intelligence and just start building it if you are someone that just does not have a lot of emotional IQ. And the reason why I bring that up is I was thinking like the stress of also being as a team member with a manager, or just like someone that does not have good emotional intelligence, could actually generate that stress for you for what was initially an uncomfortable challenge, but everyone seemed like, hey, this is fine. We can live through it. But if someone on the team starts to like lash out and start become like emotional and just not being professional, that could start making other people react in a defensive manner and start to like just kind of not feel okay. And that could create stress from other people. So that stress could just be something that was artificial, like almost like sabotage within the team, where maybe that person didn't mean to bring the team down with them, but it's just something that people can fall back onto when they feel stressed without really realizing it. So
some propagating effect at least.
Yeah, definitely. I think that allowing yourself to kind of give in to or allowing stress to make you more critical and harsh towards others definitely can propagate kind of a bad culture throughout a group, and can start kind of eating itself.
And kind of to your point too, that the ruminating part, while it is important to feel your feelings, the time scale typically for that to happen is on the minute scale, like single minute typically on average, if you trust studies that come out on this too. So anything past that is really more time spent in a non-productive way, because you're not working the problem. You're not necessarily working towards getting out of whatever pattern is getting you in that stressor in the first place. And so,
And you mentioned kind of ruminating less. One thing that I've heard from a friend of mine who studies psychology, though I can't speak to how accurate this particular concept is that when you're sort of in a ruminating state where you're sort of running through different like negative scenarios or ways things could go wrong, it's sort of that your mind is kind of like in sort of like a maybe creative sort of space where it's able to like kind of think of like new ideas and kind of like explore them in different ways. And you can kind of take that state of mind, that kind of frame of understanding, and intentionally apply that creativity to other aspects that you might want to work on instead. Like something else that requires a similar imaginative sort of mental state.
Yeah, just apply that creative mindset somewhere else that's not
Can't
so
say
detrimental.
how true that is for all people, but it seems to work well for her.
Yeah. It adds up. Sounds about right, yeah.
Okay, I think that's a pretty good discussion about, or surface level discussion of kind of what it actually feels like when stress is too far, and some actionable takeaways on how you can manage your stress both in the moment to get things under control and keep a level head, but also how to keep yourself from finding, that level of stress in the first place. And that'll take us into our next segment, Thanks Mom, where we ask ChatGPT for 2 words that we can ideate around, hopefully coming up with a good business case.
Yep. Let's see what Mom has to come up with. All right, this one is going to be very interesting. All right.
Let's see what we got.
This week's prompt is going to be lantern lizard.
Lantern again.
Oh, dear.
I feel like
Third appearance of the word lantern.
Do we want to keep this lantern?
No, this is a unique lantern.
Yeah, it's a different lantern. It's
this
not
is
an
fair
iron.
game for Thanks Mom.
This could be a very fun pet. All right. Well, let's cue the time lapse.
Okay, well, since I'm the MC, I can start us off. My first idea was a pretty literal interpretation of lantern lizard, which is a small imaging robot. So it's meant to crawl into small areas that would be hard to maintain on your own. Either like could be a clogged like civil site, it could be like a grinder, it could be like the inside of an engine, somewhere that's too dangerous for humans to look into. And this small robot could illuminate it so that like someone who's inspecting it can see better. It could take photos of its own, and then when it comes back out, you can like look at them to see what's going on. You could put different like instruments on it potentially. I'm not sure whether it'd be best for it to be on legs or maybe like a tank tread, but hopefully it would be able to like climb on surfaces like a lizard can, either like upside down or like on the wall. And that way it can navigate these like tight spaces, or maybe it just sort of jumps around randomly and can like find its way to different places just by luck.
Yeah, rather than have like an endoscope, for example, you could just have it be more detached, so it like there's no wiring the snake in, for example.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so actually writing off of the robotics idea, I came up with something kind of similar where it's like, so I was just doing some research about lizards, and like one fact about lizards, it's that they can like detach their tail when they feel threatened. I guess some lizards can't do that, and I have Jonathan here who can fact check me for this. Yeah. So what I was thinking was actually, so I was immediately thinking about like those Boston Dynamic robots, and you have those robots in like factories, like the ones that look like dogs. Like they're just doing like logistics or just like bomb defusals even, or just like they're just out doing field inspections. But what I was thinking is maybe a relatively, maybe I don't know if it's how difficult this will be, but you had the dog, and then you essentially you can give them like a tail, but like a lizard where the tail could detach if it's real threatened. In this case, the dog can just literally detach its tail, but like this tail is like it's like a snake bot. Like this could like function independently. And so what I was thinking was that you out in the field, this could be maybe an interesting way to combine 2 different like robots of different like modes of transportation together.
Because
so that the
dogs are ideal in circumstances that are very different from that of like the quadrupeds. You could have the quadruped carry the snake bot somewhere and then deploy it.
Yeah, so I was thinking like in the idea with a snake bot, maybe it could go down pipes or just do other things that like a dog like robot can't really do. But in this case also, like maybe you could have like if you send this dog/snake combo bot out in like this remote area, you can have the dog can maybe even use the snake as like a marker or like a checkpoint, so to speak, and have the snake kind of just slither away and like stay in like some hidden location while the dog is doing its own operations. And then but like the snake is kind of like a relay for the dog, so that the dog doesn't go like too far out. It knows where the snake is, so it could operate in that relative area. And then maybe at some point, I don't know how they would reconnect, but let's say they can. But like that might be an interesting use case where you have 2 different robots of different modes of operation working together, and then maybe they can still work together to achieve a common goal of something, whether it's reconnaissance or just exploration maybe or something.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's actually a very similar idea. Same to you, of like based on the tail as well, like robots that could split and do different functions. But yeah, so a relay could be one of them. For example, if you left it halfway, for example, to just get extra range, your robot can maybe go, I don't know, 10 kilometers, but you can drop the tail and then go 20 or something, or two very different functions, could be other forms as well, or robot dog and like a little quadcopter or something, just to get two different domains where the robot can, kind of stand its ground somewhere kind of safely, and the little quadcopter can go inspect higher things up, like tree lines or something like that, for example. So to not repeat kind of your idea, I'll give my wacky one too, to go in a completely different direction. Actually, I had two other wacky ones. So the first one was, how you have those glow in the dark tubes that you can crack and they shine light, but having the texture be sticky such that you can throw it on the roof and it'll stay on the ceiling or on a wall or against a tree. So it doesn't just fall back to the ground. Maybe there's some merit to having it be, you're in a tunnel and you can kind of have it appended to the surface or like the side. Maybe that allows you to kind of help give a sense of direction if you're in a tunnel or something like that too.
That could be useful, yeah. So you don't have, it could just stay on the wall somewhere easy for people to see, and it's not battery powered or anything. It's just
it doesn't have to be on the ground where the ground might have, the ground might be partially flooded. It might be really murky water, which would attenuate some of the light. So instead, you can kind of, if you don't have like a surface to plop it onto, maybe just stick it on the wall like that. You can still benefit from the full unattenuated light while going.
That's a cool idea. Yeah.
And I was thinking like you can even use this like during nighttime operations, use like the glow sticks just to mark regions of interest or something. Like, I mean, you see like in roadside constructions, they spray stuff like, oh, this is for like something we'll work on later. So maybe, I don't know, maybe you are in a cave doing some mining operation, but like you can still put glow sticks too. Maybe you can indicate like words or like signs or something. It'll probably take a lot of sticks, but
or color combinations. Red glow stick, blue glow stick means something. And then
that's an interesting one. Yeah, I had somewhat of a similar idea, but I think yours eclipses it. So I'll follow up with a different direction, which is lizards, a lot like snakes, actually will often have forked tongues that will allow them to detect scents better. At least some type of lizards do have this. So I was thinking you could have a sort of like a lantern or a light bulb that's used to detect certain chemicals in the air. So this could, in an industrial context, this could look like a continuous gas spectrometer. And sometimes they'll actually have a flame at the end, because you can get the spectral lines of whatever is burning in order to figure out like what's in the air. So it'd be like a lantern that allows you to identify smells or scents. So things that wouldn't actually have a scent, but just like particles in the air to distinguish them. Or you could have a consumer version that's much more simple, but it's just a light bulb that maybe has some sort of film or some sort of like chemical makeup that when there is a gas leak or maybe there's smoke, the color of the light changes. So it's very obvious that there's, some sort of hazard. Yeah. It's like, why is the light green all of a sudden?
That's like the lizard version of like the canary in the lantern.
Exactly. That's what I was kind of.
Which for those who don't know, I think it's from mining days, right? When they used to have gases seeping out in the mine. So you'd have a canary in a little lantern or at least a little cage ahead of you so that if the canary fainted, then you knew something was...
Birds are generally more sensitive to gases in the air.
Exactly. They would fall before you do. For my last contribution, I'm not sure how big the business case is for that, so bear with me. But I was thinking that, on my phone, I have a little Red Cross app that's for first aid for dogs and cats. And I was like, you know what? I don't know that there is one for reptiles. So I was thinking lantern knowledge, and I was thinking a repository of knowledge for all things reptile or lizard, maybe with kind of in mind that first aid aspects, because I'm sure there's a big population of people who have pet lizards, snakes, other reptiles. I'm assuming just like any living being, you have choking hazards, other kind of hazards. How do you mitigate that or help? So some kind of repository of like, hey, don't mix this and this, or watch out for these foods. Some kind of little easy, accessible database could be kind of a good, convenient thing to have at least.
Wow. Well, I need to get that app for the dogs and cats.
It's very convenient.
If I had a reptile, I would be interested in getting.
There's one for humans too. So.
Okay, for my last contribution, it would be some sort of food safe material that changes color when it's hot. So based on the temperature. So it would be, like when you have like a pan that's been on the stove, you don't necessarily know if it's hot or not. So it could be a coating that you maybe put on the handle. So that way you can tell at a glance whether something is dangerous to touch. This could be useful in crowded kitchens or even just cooking at home.
Yeah, it's happened that I've left the stove on without realizing because it's a tiny red LED and then you forget about it because you're maybe getting sidetracked that day. And then,
so it could be the cookware itself that has like an outer coating of some sort of food safe material that you can look at, you'd be like, oh, it's red, therefore it's hot.
Yeah, danger red.
Yeah, because these materials exist, but it'd probably be a matter of how you can coat like consumer goods with them, make it food safe, like exactly how should it be implemented.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good idea. I like it.
I was thinking about lizards like lounging out in the sun.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I can see that. They're bright and colorful too. Yeah. So
yeah, actually, it was interesting because you have like reptiles and other like amphibians that are like neon in color, but it's to deter other animals from going to them because like they're really poisonous and things like that. So it was kind of interesting where you have that parallel where if something is like bright red or something, like don't touch that pan, don't get near it. It's not that it's not poisonous, but like, you know, just don't touch it.
If it's really hot, you can see it, but a lot of the time it can be dangerous, but it looks totally fine.
Yeah, you wouldn't know, right?
Yeah, it's not like a white hot pan or something that's sitting there.
Yeah,
that's cool. That could be pretty useful too.
Yeah. Well, let us know if you have any ideas for what the lantern lizard could be, or if you have any advice for what to do when stress becomes unsustainable or unmanageable. Thanks for listening to this episode, and we'll catch you next time.
Have a good one.
See ya.